Here's beer, right, bud? Pale ale? You got it. So, without further ado, and I know this is somewhat of a solemn day, so I don't want to make light of what's going on. Once again, I'm extremely happy that all you decided to come out today to honor your loved ones that have passed. And who's going to continue on with that conversation is our keynote speaker. He's a friend of mine, a great guy, movie guy, book guy. He owns 5150, which is a car thing. And without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Tony Lazzarini, Vietnam veteran. He forgot he had to speak also. Tony, mic's yours.
Thanks. How come you didn't say my name when everybody else was standing up there, Ray? Okay. Well, I served in the U.S. Army, and I was a helicopter door gunner. And a lot of guys, when they hear that, especially guys who are in the service, they say, hey, I heard you guys were crazy. I said, no. I said, that's not the way it was at all. I said, you know, you really had to go through a really stringent flight physical, and they had to check your eyes, and they gave you electrocardiogram. And then at the end of the program, they sent you to a psychiatrist. And he asked you a bunch of questions, and if he decided you were crazy, they made you a door gunner. Well, a little history about helicopters and the guys that were in Vietnam. I'm just going to mention this because I was so involved with it. If you were part of a helicopter crew in Vietnam, your chances of dying were 3 times greater than the guys on the ground. We lost almost half of our helicopters in Vietnam. We lost our helicopter crews, pilots and gunners. We lost more men in Vietnam than they lost the entire war and the war in Iraq. That's how tough that job was. We lost about 96 guys out of my group. And a few years ago, I had an opportunity to go to the wall in Washington, D.C., and it's really very moving. And I looked at that wall and I thought about the 96 guys that had passed from my group. And I thought about all the guys that weren't on that wall because of those 96 guys that risked their lives to bring the people out of the field and get them to the hospitals where they belong. Well, Ray had been mentioning about commercials, and yeah, I've been involved with a few film things. And just a few months ago, I was involved with the commercial, and it was there was a group of people in suits. There was about 5 or 6 of them, and I was in like I normally am. And they asked if they wanted me to have my picture taken with these guys. And somebody said that these guys are all like high-ranking officials, you know. And so I kind of walked up to the group, and one guy in the suit said, "Were you in the Army?" I go, "Yeah, I was in the Army." He goes, "Where were you at in Vietnam?" I told him. He says, "What year?" I said, "I was there on 2 tours, 66 and 67. He said, "I was there in 66 and 67. He said, "Well, where'd you get out as?" I said, "Well, I got out as E4. He goes, "I got out as an E4 too." And this guy's in the suit, but the rest of these guys in the suits, and I figured this guy's got to be, maybe he's a general or something. And I said, "By the way, you retired as an officer?" He goes, No. He says, "I retired as a sergeant major of the U.S. Army." Jack Tilley. And it goes to show you that regardless of your rank, there's a strong brotherhood that remains in all the military services. Well, I ended up finishing about 250 missions by the time I got through. And I always tell people that, you know, the difference, usually the only difference between being a hero and being a casualty is just plain luck. And if any of you have ever been in combat, you know how true that statement is. Well, it was a real honor to meet Jack, and that's the reason we're here today is to honor those people that have served our country. They answered that call, and they gave the ultimate sacrifice. And honor is like one of the 4 keynote words in my vocabulary. The other ones are loyalty, integrity, and brotherhood. And I have a lot of times I just go off the cuff, but the important stuff I write down, so I'm going to have to read some of this. Okay. We're here to honor the men that gave the ultimate sacrifice for the call of their country. Their images are visible every day in family homes, and their names are engraved in cities made of tombstones or etched on black granite walls. Some came from small towns with names that would make you laugh, and others came from large major capital cities. They all had one thing in common. They served their country and they gave their lives for it. War is a great equalizer. It doesn't care what race you are, how much money your family has, or who your daddy is. Bombs and mortars and bullets make no distinction. I don't know if any of you ever read Henry V, but I don't think Shakespeare was ever at war, but he wrote a thing, and you've probably heard this before, and his army, King Henry's Fifth Army, was getting ready to take on a really highly trained French militia, and the king's troops were weary and they were undertrained, and only a few of them actually had fought in battle. But the king looked at him, and his lieutenant said, "Oh man, I wish," loosely translated, "I wish we had about 10,000 more guys." And the king looked at him and said, "What?" He said, "We're here for honor." He said, and if it's a sin to covet honor, then I'm the biggest sinner. And he said, "I want one more man in my group. We don't need him, because the fewer men we have, the more honor we can share among us." And he's the one that said, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. He who sheds his blood with me today shall be my brother." And when I first heard that, I understood it. And it's one of the more powerful things that I'd ever read in my life. And it really makes you think that there's things like the king had given up. He didn't care about wealth. He didn't care about clothes. He didn't care about status. But he told his men, he said, years from now, when a lot of people have passed and we celebrate this victory, you can roll up your sleeves and show your scars and say, "Listen, I was at that battle." And the people around you that weren't would somehow feel like they were lesser men because they didn't participate. But I kind of disagree with that. I think that if you serve your country, you don't necessarily have to go to war to do it. There was a great man, I think you might remember him. He said, "Don't ask what your country can do for you." And he was also a great president, too. And I feel that that's the way America should be today. I think young Americans should serve the country one way or the other, whether it's in combat or community service. I think it's important for the United States to remember that it was people that came not from this country that made this country. And we should never forget that. Well, during my 2 tours of Vietnam, I was able to help a lot of guys on their way home, and some of them were laughing in khakis and having a great time. And some of them were silent, and they were clad in vinyl green bags. And I didn't have a chance to honor them at that time, but please help me honor them today. Thank you.
Tony Lazzarini, folks.